Rose was the first deaf contestant on Strictly Come Dancing in 2021 and actually won it. She's played roles on TV, Reunion, Code of Silence, Doctor Who, and presented in the BBC documentaries like Signs for Change and Old Hands, New Tricks. But on Channel 4, when she was presenting the Paris Paralympic Games in 2024, there was a dark truth she wasn't sharing. Did you know deaf athletes can't compete in the Paralympics? It sounds impossible, but it's true. While Paralympians inspire the world, deaf competitors are excluded unless they have a valid disability. I'm half deaf, half blind, and have spent years studying how sports coaching and policy shapes inclusion. The evidence is clear. We are holding people back. In this video, I want to talk about why this happens, what it means for deaf people like Rose, and the key lessons coaches can use to build more inclusive environments. You know, it's strange being deaf on its own isn't considered enough of a disability to compete in the Paralympics, but at the same time, deaf athletes are at a clear disadvantage when it comes to the Olympics. They can't hear the gun go off, their teammates talking to them, a coach or supporter shouting at them from the sidelines, so they're left stuck in the middle. This doesn't sit right with me. Diksha Dagger, a deaf golfer from India, competed in the Paris 2024 Olympics. She was born and still is profoundly deaf. Aaron Small is hard of hearing and uses hearing aids to help communication. He competed in the sprint kayak event in Paris 24, but he can hear without the aids. Others in Paris 24 include Mackenzie Arnold, Australia women's football, hard of hearing. Meg Harris, Australian women's swimming, has some hearing loss. Drew Kibler, USA, men's swimming, uses hearing aids but seems to hear without them. Emma Messerman, Belgium women's basketball, uses hearing aids but can hear without them. Then David Smith, USA men's volleyball, wears hearing aids but can hear some things without them. All incredible people, but that is 7 out of 10,000, and only one profoundly deaf. Paralympics, Susanna Hext, British swimmer, profoundly deaf, but qualifies after being paralysed in 2012 from being in a riding accident. She didn't actually compete due to health concerns. Then Brendan Hall, Australian swimmer, hard of hearing, but qualifies after losing his right leg from chickenpox. And that's it from what I can see for the Paralympics. That's 2 in 4,400. With the World Health Organization saying over 5% of the world's population need help with hearing impairments, these numbers seem a bit off. Many come from low and middle income countries and from old age. So you could argue older people won't compete. And people from poorer countries might not have the resources to compete at the Olympics. Then only around 70% of children actually play sport, about 35% of people older than 15, so some people just don't play sport. Still, 1% or even half of a percentage seems fair. 7 in 10,000 is 0.07%, 2 in 4,400 is 0.05%. We are well short of half of a percentage, so the problem is clear. Deaf athletes either have fewer chances at the Olympics or don't qualify for the Paralympics. A quick note here, the International Paralympic Committee have a mission to support para-athletes for an inclusive world of sport. And their website has an amazing accessibility menu, but no sign language videos, in British Sign Language or any other sign language. Deaf people can struggle reading long blocks of text and have lower reading ages due to difficulty in education. Maybe simplify the language or use bullet points if signed videos aren't an option. But the fix to athlete inclusion doesn't have to be complicated. Either create specific deaf categories inside the Paralympics, or make the Olympic coaching and systems adapt properly. Better visual signals, specialised training, deaf awareness, or basic sign language being preferable. That way, deaf athletes aren't left on the sidelines of both worlds. But this already exists, the Deaflympics. Most people don't realise the Deaflympics exists. It even started decades before the first Paralympic Games were held. There were 8 Deaflympics Summer Games and 1 cancelled, and 3 Winter Deaflympic Games before the first Paralympic Games in 1960. But unlike the Olympic and Paralympic Games, they get almost no coverage. You don't see highlights on TV, there aren't daily updates in the news, and funding behind it is tiny, minuscule in comparison. UK Deaf Sport had to raise £500,000 to fund the team to go to Tokyo Deaflympics for November this year. Yes, the Deaflympics is happening this year in November 2025, if you didn't know. I think some of the events will be streamed on the Deaflympics YouTube channel, and that's it. But for many deaf athletes, it feels like their achievements happen sort of like in the shadows. That is, if they get funding from somewhere to go and compete in the first place. Now, with over 4,500 athletes from more than 70 different countries competing in over 200 different events from 20 different sports, putting them into the Paralympics isn't really possible. The 2025 Tokyo Deaflympics is predicted to be bigger than the 2024 Paris Paralympics, so attendance is an obvious issue if you're going to merge the two games. Deaf culture and language would also be a huge challenge if the games were to merge. In-sport communication, like instructions or referee signals, starting signals, sport categories. Is there a deaf event version of every sport? Navigation and communication around the venues. Interpreters for hearing volunteers would be expensive. Deaf spectators would also need help with sporting updates, finding venues and schedule times. For deaf athletes holding press conferences, team meetings, social bonding with other athletes at the games, they would likely need an interpreter. That would probably be self-funded, or they just wouldn't have interpreters and stay with the deaf people, defeating a huge reason for bringing the games together in the first place. Then for hearing aids and cochlear implants, some sports have limitations. Water sports, contact sports. Even with the trampoline coaching that I do with deaf people, we need to be careful as the static electricity created from the friction with the metal frame of the trampoline can damage the aids. But they aren't the biggest issues. Rose says it perfectly here.
We are very able, but so there's the famous quote, I'm not disabled because I'm disabled. I'm disabled because the world disabled me.
Deaf people can do it. They are able-bodied. If you look at the 100-metre times from the Paralympics T64 category, T64 is the lower limb prosthetic, so the closest category to the Olympics, all the Deaflympians would have done well in that race. If last place in the Deaflympics 100-metre race ran in any other category in the Paralympics, they would have won. Hearing people make deaf people feel disabled. Subtitles on films at certain times on certain days. You can't just go in when you want. Waiting longer for help from someone who can interpret. Difficulty asking for, everyday basics because hearing people just don't understand. Asking for something to be repeated multiple times, like again and again and again. Now, we're talking about athletes who train as hard, who break records, who inspire communities, but because the Deaflympics barely get media attention, their impact is limited. Imagine working years and years and years for a medal and almost nobody outside of your sport even knows that it happened. The fix here? Better coverage. Show the Deaflympics on TV, stream it online, bring the stories of these athletes into the mainstream. The Paralympics for physical impairment and then the Deaflympics for cultural impairment. Just as people tune into the Paralympics because the coverage makes it accessible, the same can happen for the Deaflympics if the spotlight is there. When you amplify visibility, you amplify opportunity. However, there is another option. Diksha, the deaf Indian golfer, competed and won medals in the Deaflympics before going to the Olympic Games. Other Deaflympians are looking to do the same thing, for the competition, recognition, but also for the support and the funding. UK Olympic athletes get funding from the National Lottery and UK Sport. As mentioned, Deaflympians get nothing. UK Deaf Sport got 1.2 million from Sport England to increase sport and physical activity until 2027, which is nice for participation, but Where are the role models? Rose is great on TV, but our athletes struggle to even get out and go and compete in the Deaf Olympics. Promoting another games like the Deaf Olympics is one option, but most deaf athletes would be coached by hearing people. If they get coached at all, it is scary going into a new group or sports club as it is, going in knowing you will potentially struggle to communicate with everyone adds another barrier to just starting. On the surface, that might sound fine, a hearing person coaching a deaf person, but it can actually be quite limiting. If a coach doesn't understand deaf culture or how to communicate clearly, maybe in sign language, important cues, strategies, and feedback can just get lost. Not to mention discussions with parents if they are also deaf. It makes it harder for deaf athletes to compete at the highest levels. When deaf athletes have coaches and support who understand deaf culture and can communicate with basic sign language, their performance improves, their confidence grows, and they feel fully included. It's not about disability, it's about access and understanding. The solution here, I think, is simple. Incorporate deaf awareness, deaf culture, sign language into just sports coaching and society more broadly. Waving hello and goodbye is a simple start. Face the person so they can read your lips. Avoid bright lights behind you like the sun because it makes lip reading really hard. Be patient. When communication barriers drop, everyone wins. Athletes reach their potential and sport becomes truly inclusive. It may lead to more deaf athletes at the Olympics. In addition, education about facial expressions, body language, and basic sign language helps with communication with everyone, deaf and hearing alike. I use basic BSL with everyone that I coach. It helps with mainstream children and adults, as well as those with special educational needs, all-round communication. My coaching philosophy uses ideas from ecological psychology to include everyone. In this video, I actually talk about 10 different rules every ecological coach should know.